From Otherwhere, this is Here Be Monsters.
Jeff.
Hey, Dad.
What's up?
You know why I'm calling you, yeah?
Well, you have it under the premise that you wanted to chat with me and maybe had something to do with Here Be Monster episodes or retrospective versus prospectiveness of my thoughts about it, or maybe it was more.
Well, no, I mean, I'm thinking about these couple moments that I've had. You know, it's like, it's been a decade now that I've been doing this, and as it happens, every now and then I wind up talking about my own life. And I think a couple times you've kind of heard something I've said and then come back to me and said, I think you need the fatherly perspective on this. Does that ring a bell?
I remember those discussions. Oh, yeah.
I never really knew what that meant.
Uh-huh.
What is the fatherly perspective?
What do you think?
Well, I don't know. I'm not a dad.
Yeah, but when you ask somebody a question like, are you more like your mom or your dad? I'd say, where did that come from? I wonder if that question's based on something we did or didn't do during your upbringing. If Mom and I are listening to it together, we kind of look at each other and say, did we do that to him? Did we make him that way?
That way? What's that way?
It could be good, and it could be like, oh, geez, really? Or some of the townspeople who might come up to your father after an episode and say, I just listened to your son's HBM show, and was that true, Dr. Emtman? And I just have to look at him and say,
wait, that's happened?
Yes.
I'm trying to think what I would have said that would have been so controversial that someone would have accosted you at the grocery store.
Nobody accosts me at any grocery store. And what I'm saying is that if you ask the right people, there are a few people in Pullman that actually listen to your show, believe it or not. And, they would not necessarily say it to my face, but they'd say, really, is that how you parented your kid? And
what did I say, though? You have to tell me what I said that was so controversial.
Well, some things, Jeff, I might not want to say everything to you that they told me. Maybe we can just say that I remember it differently.
Where do you think I got my desire to spin a narrative from?
I don't know. What were you thinking?
I don't know. I mean, we are in part our parents, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think you're more like your mom or more like your dad?
Oh, definitely more like my father, for sure.
So you said you just listened to the last 2 episodes.
Yes, I did.
And so the thing that was 2 episodes ago was an interview with H Greenfield. And I will say that I really liked that conversation, but as soon as we hung up the call, I was like, I had this phrase bouncing around in my head, right? It's the fatherly perspective. I was like, I don't know what that means. But one of the first things I did do is I did email his dad.
Yeah, that's interesting that you said that, because that was a little note that I made here. Why Alex described or made you see his dad. It's like, oh, is that really? Is he portraying his dad in a way that his dad would say, yep, that's me, or not quite? I'm sure that there's more to the story.
Here Be Monsters, the podcast about,
whatever your predilections are.
The podcast about the unknown.
The sponsor of this episode is Pal's Plants. Pal's Plants is a subscription service for potted plants and intriguing zines. If you live anywhere within the 5 boroughs of New York City, Pal's Plants will mail you a little potted plant each month. Maybe something leafy, maybe something prickly, maybe something else altogether. You can also get zines delivered each month, like DIY punk zines, or art books or comics. Plants and zines each month for you or someone you care about. That's Pal's Plants. Plant delivery is available for anyone who lives in New York City, and the zine subscriptions can be delivered anywhere in the United States. Pal's Plants is run by a longtime Here Be Monsters listener named Laura, and when Laura and I were talking about doing this sponsorship, I asked if we could set up like a discount code for other Here Be Monsters listeners, and of course she said yes. So when you sign up for Pal's Plants at palsplants.com, use the discount code HBM50 and you'll get half off your first month subscription. Again, that's palsplants.com and use discount code HBM50. And last thing for New Yorkers, if you want to do a little bit of in-person plant and zine shopping, head to the Brooklyn Navy Yard on December 3rd and 4th and look for the booth for Pal's Plants. Thank you, Pal's Plants, for sponsoring this episode of Here Be Monsters.
Listen, children of the night, what music they make.
Yeah. You know, I was thinking before I got on this call, I was like, when's the last time I've done a night interview? It's been a long time. I haven't done it in ages. You get up late and you go to bed late, right?
I do not do when the big yellow thing is in the sky. I sleep in my coffin. Actually, in the past few months, I have had no schedule whatsoever.
Well, one thing I want to check with you before we get too far into this is I want to make sure I'm using the right title when I refer to you. And I know you're a person with several prefixes and suffixes. And so I was wondering if we could start there, if you could just give me your full name.
Alan Greenfield, or Alan Henry Greenfield, or Alan H Greenfield, or Alan fucking Greenfield, but I don't know if you want to do that on your show. That was some program that named me that, so I use it, you know. It's Alan fucking Greenfield, da, 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 da. And I was the next on stage, so I said, okay, I'll keep it.
You know, Alex said that you sometimes have introduced yourself as a researcher in the shadow realm. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, I don't ever recall using that particular term, but Alex is a very, very inventive person himself, and I think I was going to make a mixed metaphor. The shoe never drops far from the tree. I'll have to think about that one. Okay.
Part of the reason I wanted to talk to you is because every now and then when I make something for the podcast, my dad will like email me or call me. He thinks that I'm quite inventive as well sometimes. Why do you say that about Alex? Why do you say he's inventive?
It was not meant as a pejorative, anything but. I mean, he's a screenwriter and does the wrestling thing, which requires inventiveness that you can't even talk too much about because, of course, none of it is staged. None of it. Yeah, he's more into the fictional aspect of the occult, and I'm into the real McCoy. I mean, not that he hasn't had some experiences, but I noticed he didn't mention one of the major things that we did that was pretty eerie, which was the late Brookwood Hotel.
Will you tell me about that?
You sure you want to know about it? It doesn't exist anymore. They literally tore the place down, but it was at one time it was a hotel, a legitimate hotel on Peachtree Street, which is the main drag in Atlanta. And it became kind of a house of ill fame. In fact, a couple of different ones on the property. And then it went out of business. So Alex and I and this runaway girl and her brother. So we Broke in is probably a slight exaggeration. I mean, because it was, we went through a window that was open. We didn't break anything. And we started looking around for anything spooky that we might find. We were looking in different rooms in the hotel. And then we got to a room, and this room had a funny shaped wall. Hard to describe, but there was an insignia that I recognized as something that Black Lodges use.
For those who aren't familiar with the Black Lodge, what is that?
It traces to Victorian occultism. The concept of a Black Lodge is a lodge of magicians that has the purpose of keeping people in their place. And it gets darker and darker and darker. It's self-feeding. And I have had one or two very unpleasant encounters. And I must say, I've gotten off relatively lightly because some of my contemporaries died under mysterious circumstances. So it looked to me like it was sort of like an armoire. It was old-fashioned stand-alone closet space. So I opened it up, and there was something really, really weird inside. But I can't tell you what it was because it was like we were all standing there going, Jesus H. Christ. And I've often said that interdimensional things probably cannot be seen by a human sight in the way that it actually is, because we are really not equipped to do anything but drop out of the trees, go hunting, try not to get hunted ourselves, reproduce, and die. That's what our five senses are all about. So if we encounter something else, we're going to see Yetis or UFOs or whatever. In this case, it was the raw whatever.
Can you describe what it looked like or what it sounded like, what it felt like at all?
It had a sound like a low-pitched hum. But what it looked like was unlike anything that I've seen before or since in any kind of context. So the closest I can come is, I looked long and hard for something. It's whenever in fictional context they, try to depict a portal to otherwhere or to fairy or to, whatever you want to call it, something that isn't a nothing but isn't anything that you can identify. It was formless, but not void. It didn't have any sense of evil. It just had a sense of other, really, really other. Very disconcerting. And of course, I disappointed myself as a field investigator on that occasion because I should have probably at least stuck a finger through it and see if it was, like Stargate or something. But I didn't. Alex probably was too young to be really scared, but everybody else was having an aversion to it. And I said, let's close the door.
How old was Alex when this happened?
10, maybe.
And how did you explain it to him? How did you navigate his questions?
He didn't ask any questions about it. He just looked at it. This is a young man who had been brought up around neo-pagan rituals, and which he didn't like, and the Gnostic Mass, which I don't know what he thought about that, but I don't know what to say. He never said a memorable thing about that. What he did was, however, he read every Stephen King book that he could lay his hands on. He was born in 1973. And before he was a year old, I was taking him to a hot spot for UFOs. So I never hesitated to take him.
What do you think UFOs are?
My provisional opinion on any subject be it God or the devil or something in between, is subject to change with additional information. That being said, there is considerable scientific evidence and also, from a different standpoint, magical evidence that there are parallel worlds to our own, which sometimes accidentally or on purpose are breached, and UFOs and cryptids and all kinds of strange stuff manifest themselves here. And there are a few stories that are totally bizarre, but that come from reputable sources that indicate to me that what people are seeing is something sort of like what I found in the closet. They're seeing something that cannot be described. So just as everything in our reality is filtered through our sensory system and our brains sort of put it together in a coherent fashion, but it's still secondhand information. We're not really built to see whatever it is these other dimensions are producing. And it seems to me that sometimes you will see a Yeti coming out of a flying saucer. Most people that are interested in UFOs say they believe in UFOs. Where is it a belief system? I mean, they either exist or they don't exist. They either are or they aren't subject to investigation and resolution, which is why I heavily encourage field investigation by non-credulous people.
We interrupt this program to give you a bulletin just received from one of our naval units at sea. A large object traveling at supersonic speed is headed over the North Atlantic toward the east coast of the United States.
What was the first time that you ever remember seeing a depiction of an alien?
That would be Michael Rennie playing the part of Klaatu in The Day the Earth Stood Still in 1952 or 53. My mother took me to see it. I got really, really scared of Gort, the robot. Gort scared the living crap out of me.
Do you know why?
Yeah, I know why. It was a Freudian thing. He's carrying this girl, this phallic-shaped thing, into the flying saucer. And as they say about a train goes into a tunnel, you don't have to be Fellini to figure that out. It was too much for little Alan.
The irony there is not easy to miss. You wound up being so afraid of this thing that you had to leave, and then you've spent most of the rest of your life chasing that thing.
I don't know. I mean, that was an immature response. And somewhere around 12 or 13, I got involved in all the things that I've been involved with ever since. On the one side, science fiction. I joined NICAP, the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena, a really stick-in-the-mud UFO group. And I joined the Mystic Arts Book Society, which took every book on the occult that wasn't nailed down under copyright and reprinted it. So I read them all, including that tarot deck that I got from them. And my first tarot reading, 1962, was for my mother. I mean, and I've been reading ever since then.
What do you think it's useful for?
I think it's tuning into archetypal reality. So you're tuning in to that force in the universe that makes the galaxy spiral and makes the spiral in your tub when you're emptying it. Same thing.
Do you have a deck nearby?
No, I don't own a deck now. I've been reading that long. If you want a reading, I can do one by envisioning the cards.
I mean, do you think that would be an appropriate thing to do in this conversation about like child rearing and parenthood and stuff like that? I don't want to overstep.
I would prefer to do that off the air.
Okay. How are you doing over there? Do you want to keep going now, or do you want to take a break?
No, I'll let you know. Some time back, I discovered the emergency way so that I could keep on talking and
oh, yeah, there you
not
go.
soil myself, as it were.
Was that a pickle jar? Is that what that was?
I took the label off. Yeah, it's probably a pickle jar.
Well, thankfully, it's empty.
Yes, it's empty for now.
When people have asked me if I want to have kids in my life, I truly don't know the answer to it. I'm just kind of curious about how in your life, how did that decision get made? Was it a decision? Was it something you knew from a young age, or was it a surprise? Or
No. I think I probably expected to have children, but I don't think I had given it a lot of thought. Alex was born when I was 25, I think. And I was not ready to be a parent. I didn't have a clue. And it was way too early for me to be having children. But it was a decision. Just his mother and I were immature hippies, straight off the street, radical train. We probably made more mistakes than he deserved.
You've been able to forgive yourself for those mistakes?
No. But I was able, just this past, about a week ago, seeing Alex at dinner with Randall there. We had sort of agreed to disagree about something long ago, religion, a certain stepmother's actions, etc. And I talked it through straight from the heart. And that was a relieving experience. But like I said, everybody has things that they would have differently. Because of my own upbringing, I'm not blaming it, but I'm saying I was ill-prepared for situations where, like when his mother left, and there was an awful scene where Alex found her packing her van and leaving, and he came running to me, and we literally ran after her van.
How did you navigate that moment? That's a tricky moment in an entirely different way than the closet, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, no, totally different. That was a moment of profound sadness because it was my first marriage, and I guess I assumed it was for life because my parents were together for, 40 years, whatever. And it completely freaked Alex out. And I did not respond real well to that. It's like, first thing I did was I went to see a lawyer. We were in Tucson at the time. He said, I could give you a lot of advice, but my best advice is get a state line between this woman. So got my mother to wire me some money, and we got on a Greyhound bus 3 days and 3 nights straight through to Atlanta. And Alex was so traumatized, he couldn't stop talking for all 72 hours. That drove me crazy, and from then on, I had a really bad temper with him. And he reminded me of this just the other day when he was in town, that I started putting Post-it notes all over the place that said, never temper, a reminder to me, don't be temperamental with him. None of this is his fault. And that gradually worked on me. So I did. And I thought I was much better prepared when I decided again later in life to have kids again. Still, even if you have a second chance, you're going to make some of the same mistakes. I'm really trying to talk you out of parenting, and that is not my intent here. So let me say this. The good part of it is I'm very proud of my children. I can't tell you how proud I am of Alex and his career. I mean, when he was a teenager, he got in so many fights. He had 2 different teachers that said, he's going to wind up in prison. And instead, I have had no reason not to be very proud of him since. Again, we have different views on some things, but I feel like his success is mine. And that's the best part of parenting. It's a splendid experience. If your children turn out to be good and all right, even with whatever mistakes you made, and every parent makes mistakes.
Have you heard people say that it's unethical to bring someone into the world knowing that you'll cause them suffering? I'm thinking about the situation where you're riding 72 hours with Alex on a bus, and you might have said like shell-shocked, right?
Mm-hmm.
The idea of like causing that is profoundly unappealing to me. I think one thing I'm really scared of is that whole idea of essentially knowing that you're going to traumatize someone, but just not knowing when.
No, I really, that's a novel thought to me. Yeah, they're going to experience pain. You can't experience pleasure without being able to experience pain. That goes back to unicellular organisms. Freud made a point of saying that life began when it became too painful for organisms to die, and therefore they continue to live and to evolve. That's the way we are. The question is, do you regret being alive? I don't at all. If you enjoy things about your life, chances are your children will too. I mean, the objections that I think of are mostly impersonal ones, like climate change and mad dictators in Holy Mother Russia.
Should we tell children that Santa Claus is real or not?
Oh, that's a good one. When Alex was little, I risked my life, literally, to convince him that Santa Claus was real. It was Christmas Eve. There are gifts all over the floor, and I go out on my mother's little balcony on the 8th floor of her building, and I inch out on the ledge to the room where Alex is sleeping, knock on the window and say, ho, 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 Merry Christmas, and inch my way back. Fortunately, I got back in, and Alex came into the room with this incredible, I heard Santa, and then we all played along. Well, he's the most skeptical of my children, and I think that teaching that there is a Santa Claus is probably, if you want your child to have any kind of foundation that doesn't get swept out from under them when they're 10 or 12, maybe you should tell them about Krampus instead of Santa Claus.
I think that's a really hard thing that a lot of parents have to deal with, is this like idea that you do want like your child's life to be enchanted, and then I don't know, it's just such a trope like of children having like an identity crisis when they realize that they've been lied to. What do you think is the most effective way to provide enchantment for a child that doesn't involve lying to them?
Reading fairy tales in an animated fashion. There are plenty of those stories that are extremely animated and animating. 3 Little Pigs is one of my favorites. And it teaches a really good lesson without anybody saying, oh, there were really 3 little pigs and they built a house of straw. And
is the moral of that story to have a sturdy house?
To have a sturdy everything, or the wolf representing death and destruction, will blow your world apart.
Do you think being a parent has affected your perception of the passage of time?
Oh, God, yes. My mother told me in old age, she lived into her 80s, she said, I dream about my brothers and sisters a lot, but they're all young in my dreams. By young, I don't know what she meant, and I can't ask her now. It's all the questions you didn't ask. If you have questions for your dad, ask him while he's around, because questions will come to mind and you'll look around you and there's nobody to answer them. And that's really frustrating. But I started having dreams a year or two ago about my children. And in the dreams, they're all little children. None of them are. The youngest is 31. The oldest is pushing 50. Nevertheless, they're all little kids in my dreams. I think because you develop your affection for your children when they're little, and probably can't avoid feeling kind of abandoned when they make their way into the world, even though that's sort of your success story, you know?
I heard you tell a story a while back that I actually found really moving about a dream that you had when you were quite young, related to a blue boy, a vision in a mirror.
Oh.
Am I getting that right?
Oh, yeah. Keep in mind that I was 3 or 4 when this was going on. There was a light fixture in the living room, which I rarely went into. It was sort of a show living room, which was something that my parents liked to have a place that was more or less untouched by human hands. So there was always a living room. But there was a light fixture that was brown and teardrop shaped, looked kind of like a Hershey's Kiss upside down. And I developed a boogeyman fixation on this thing. If the reflection in the mirror, which there was a big mirror in the living room, saw me, something bad would happen. So if I passed the living room, I would sneak past to the other side of the area where the living room was located. And at some point during that period of my life, under 5 years old, I had a dream that I was in the living room, I was looking at the reflection of reflection, and this glowing blue child that looked vaguely like me came out of the mirror, came down from the mantle under the mirror, put his hands out, and we danced around. That was the entirety of the dream. Fast forward to the 1990s, I had just gotten full custody of my younger children, and I was looking for a new place to live, but prices of rentals in Atlanta during the Olympics were just prohibitive. And some friends of mine said, well, this place seems like it's okay. And I thought, well, if it's a dump, I'm really not going to move there. But this was a house that immediately reminded me of the house that I had spent my early childhood in. Randall, my youngest, was about the age I was when I saw the reflection in the mirror and had the dream. So I picked up Randall, a 2-year-old, and went into the house, and off to the right was a living room. And I immediately thought, this looks just like the living room in the house I grew up in, which was 200 miles away. So I walked in holding him in my arms, and there was a mantle, and there was a mirror. And I looked in the mirror, just to see if there was a light fixture or something, because I had that sense of, I wouldn't call it déjà vu, because I didn't feel like it was the same, but it was the same setting. It had the same ambiance about it. I looked at myself, and I looked at Randall, and I realized, oh my God, Randall is the little blue boy, the spitting image. That was a moment to be reckoned with. You can call it precognitive or magic or coincidence, whatever your predilections are, but it was important to me.
What do you think it means? What's your interpretation?
I think the universe has a way of reminding us that it's conscious now and again for reasons that are inscrutable to me and probably beyond human capabilities of really understanding. So people who, think they have a real handle on the ultimate nature of reality don't. What it is, again, it's sort of like the thing in the closet. It's not something you can put your finger on because it is something beyond human comprehension. Why do some people see little gray aliens and some people see abominable snowmen? And as far as I've been able to discern, they're the same thing.
Alan, I'm kind of getting to the end of my questions here.
First time I've talked about my personal life that much. It's I don't know if I'll regret it or not, but it's all really out of my experience. Alex does a pretty good job, but he was the kid and I was the adult, and the perspective is going to be different. I imagine that some of my childhood experiences would have been told differently by my parents. In fact, I know they were.
Yeah. I'm not sure if you can tell. My brain is kind of in decline now as it's getting closer to midnight in Seattle.
You're getting very, very sleepy. You will mention my third book in the trilogy. You will. You will.
What's its title, Alan?
We don't have a title yet. Probably be Secrets of the Black Lodge or something very close to that. My publisher, Olive, and I have our work cut out for us. I don't want to scare anybody away from the occult, but it's been a close call here and there. And it will come out, even if we've all gone to the devil.
Maybe we can stop the recording, but then just stay on the line for just a second longer, and maybe you can tell me a couple cards?
Yeah.
Okay. Alan starts shuffling a deck of cards in his mind. It's nearly midnight for me, nearly 3 a.m. for him. He asks me what my question is, and I say I want to know whether or not I should have children. Alan goes into a trance and pulls 3 cards from the deck in his mind. Prince of Wands, 9 of Wands, 3 of Swords. He says this reading isn't as positive as he expected it to be. He's especially concerned about the 3 of Swords, says that might signal trouble in my relationship. And per my question of, should I have children or not, Alan says that I could, but I shouldn't expect it to be easy. He follows this up by saying in some ways, he feels like this reading is kind of like a reading for himself too. And so we talk a little bit more about the challenges of parenting, the ethics of Santa Claus, and then we say goodbye. My name is Jeff Emtman, and I made this episode of Here Be Monsters. I owe a big thank you to my dad, Rick Emtman, and to H Greenfield, who is currently working on his new book. It's not out yet, but over on the Here Be Monsters website, I've linked to some of his other books, including Secret Cipher of the UFOnauts. The podcast website is HBM157.com. Here Be Monsters is an independent podcast supported by listeners. You can send a small monthly donation by joining the Here Be Monsters Patreon at patreon.com/HBMpodcast. Music on this episode came from Cirocell and The Black Spot. Thanks for listening. More episodes soon.